Hello ladies and gentlemen, MarauderEX here with kind of just a look. We have here the Indivisible backer preview. Now this is different than the prototype. The prototype was basically just a proof of concept that Lab Zero came up with to try to show off what they wanted to do for this game that they were still in the process of crowdfunding for. Now the game's been crowdfunded, it's been, you know, the funding's ready, it's in development, it's coming out 2018 according to all projections, so wanting to look at it and see what changes have been made from the prototype to the backer preview, because obviously the prototype was done a while ago, and you know it was done more as a proof of concept, and now that they actually have the means in which to build the game, some things have changed. I kind of wanted to look at some of those. For the most part, everything looks like it's got a little bit more polish on it, which is what you would kind of expect, but the entertaining part is the prototype had an amazing amount of polish for a prototype, something that was basically just a proof of concept. It had an amazing amount of polish. I loved the visuals, I loved the art style, I loved the UI, I loved the music, the soundtrack, the sound effects. Everything felt just really polished, and the backer preview has a little bit more polish on top of that, which is, you know, it's what you would expect, but it's also still really impressive given just the fact that they had the bar set kind of high with their prototype. Some things do feel a little out of place. I will say I liked the UI better in ways in the prototype than in the backer preview. There are some things that I don't like about either, and there's not really a good middle ground between it that I think they'd be able to do. So the old UI had basically a gauge, just as a solid bar that had sections as time went on, allowing to indicate what your attacks were available. Each character could store up to 3 attacks. The bar would, you know, fill up to the end. If you had all the way full, you'd have 3 attacks. Anything in, you know, the third sections showed how many out of 3 attacks you had. I liked the UI for that because it was clean. It was very uniform. Because no matter where the battle was taking place, what everyone's relative positions felt like, the UI was always there. You could always tell who had what attacks available. It was... It felt less cluttered. Now, the new UI doesn't really feel cluttered, per se, but it's a little bit harder to follow because the UI is now kind of free-flowing. It follows underneath each individual character. And instead of a bar that shows your number of attack rounds, you have little gems that fill up that indicate how many attacks you have. Still, same number of attacks, 3 attacks, and it fills up. Some fill up faster, slower. It depends on the character. It depends, I'd imagine, on stats. And the original UI, the bar would fill up at differing speeds depending on what was going on in combat. But I think the gems filling up will be a little bit harder to see on smaller screens. Things like the Switch, which this is coming out for, I think might be a little more difficult to see the progression for that. But it's more of a, do you have the attack ready or not, versus how much longer do you have to build up to see if that attack's available. I think the bar had you could tell how quickly you were going to get an attack. This one is rather, do you just have the attacks saved up or not. I think the gems look nicer, personally, but I think it's a little weirder to tell attack timing, is where I'm coming from for that. The one thing I don't like about the old UI is each character's HP was represented based off of 5,000 out of 5,000. So if you weren't paying attention to the specific numbers, characters could die without you realizing it, because there's not really any indicator of you're getting lower, other than seeing, oh, I'm at, 500 out of 5,000. I'm really hurting. Whereas on the new UI, each character has a green bar that progressively turns more yellow and red as it gets toward the end, showing you just how critical your HP is. It still has a numerical value, so you can still be like, oh, well, you know, they've got this much HP, we're taking about this much damage, etc. But the HP bar as an indicator is so much more helpful. It's so much easier to figure out what your health is. So it's kind of an odd trade-off, because the only way I could see taking the best parts of both would be having two separate bars, one of which being your attack build-up, the other being your HP. So one you're wanting to build up, the other you're hoping doesn't, you know, go down. But that would be, you know, 8 individual bars per character, or per battle, because you have 2 bars per character, 4 characters on screen. And then the attack bar is 1 bar sectioned into 3 sections. That's a lot of UI clutter, and so it's like it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. I know there are going to be people who like the old UI better than the new UI. I'm letting the new one grow on me, but like I said, I think it's going to have some issues with smaller screens like the Switch when it's in handheld mode. But it's also not nearly as, I guess, fluid is the way that I would want to word it, because you're not sitting there watching the bar fill with the gemstones. You're just waiting to see, okay, is the gem lit up? Gem's lit up, I can use it, rather than like, okay, it looks like it's about 45%. That means I've got, you know, another 2 seconds before I can attack again. You're not necessarily doing that. There probably will be people doing that, but that's different. So the UI, that is one huge change. Another change to the UI is the attack indicator, which I think is really awesome. I think it's so much more helpful, because for the prototype, the old combat indicator, if someone was being attacked, that character would flash red for just a second as an enemy was getting ready to attack, which, the way that the characters kind of overlap each other, if it's a character on the top point of your square, basically, they could be blocked by, you know, 1 or 2 characters, depending on the character, your positioning, and what was going on. So only a section of them would, you know, flash red. You might not be able to see it as easily. Now they have a clear indicator. There's a red line that goes from the attacking enemy to the attacking target, so that you have a little bit more time to plan your defense. And since defense is a time-oriented thing as well as a spatial-oriented thing, that's actually really helpful, because it's like, okay, I know this particular enemy has, you know, an attack that kind of, you know, sweeps, could hit more than one enemy. They're attacking this person. Is it more beneficial to block with that one person, or to spend more of your resource gauge to block with everyone to, you know, block a sweeping attack? So there's a lot more to it now that you're able to... The combat mechanics were always there, but now it's a little bit easier to see and to plan your tactics. So I really like the attack indicator. And now that there's an attack indicator, there's also a new type of attack. There's basically grabs, which it's viewed as an orange attack line rather than a red. And the only way to block it is to time your defense very specifically. So it adds the time defense mechanics of, you know, other games like Super Mario RPG, and takes that to a whole new level, because otherwise, if you don't perfectly time the defense for the grab attack, you're still going to get attacked. There's no, like, lessening the damage of it like you do other attacks. It's an all or nothing for the grabs, which is an interesting new mechanic. It is one that is also going to be, I'm assuming, no end of frustration, so that until you learn what the specific timing is for each enemy's particular grab attack, if that enemy has one. So the attack indicator is really awesome, and is now allowing for a new type of enemy attack and a new way to defend, which is really interesting. The biggest problem I have with the backer preview is the camera. Combat in the prototype seemed very fixed, even though you could kind of move around, like as you were attacking enemies, you're kind of pushing them back, so the camera would zoom out just ever so slightly. In the backer preview, because you can kind of attack enemies as they're coming towards you or going away, depending on what cycle of attack animation everyone's in. Like if one of the enemies comes up to attack you and you're in defense mode, and they attack, and then now you're able to attack yourself, the enemy might still kind of be in the middle there, and you can attack them there, which, can alter the number of hits for your combos and things like that, or you can wait till they're a little bit closer to the enemies to try to, get more enemies in, sweeping type attacks. The only problem is, because of how combat seems to change animation-wise, the camera feels really jittery, really uncomfortably jittery. Like it's trying to zoom in and out too quickly based off of that specific second's series of attack and defense animations. And the camera's going too fast, basically. Like, you have like a split second where, okay, maybe it needs to zoom in if there was going to be more there, but it's just literally a split second. And so it feels really jittery on that. And I hope that's just, the current beta state that it's in. I hope that's something that they're able to go, oh yeah, the prototype, the camera was a little more, fluid, it was a little more fixed, there wasn't any weird jittering. Let's see if we can get that back. Or if it's just something they hadn't even noticed until, myself and other backers are like, hey, this seems a little jittery. Can that be addressed somehow? I don't know how, but hopefully somehow. The other thing about combat that gets me is, in the original prototype, enemies felt positioned better for sweeping attacks, because if you press up or down while you're attacking, it changes the style of attack. Pressing up typically goes for a sweeping attack for any of your offensive characters that's more AoE than your standard attack. Now it feels like the enemies are really close together, so it feels like if you're using a regular attack and the enemies are close together, the regular attack is going to hit multiple enemies, whereas the up and down for the sweeping type attacks don't really feel like they're hitting as many enemies. Because it feels like you have 3 sections. You've got like the background, the middle ground, and the foreground, and the sweeping attacks seem to attack all of those. Whereas now regular attacks can hit in any one of those particular fields, but, further along that field. So if there's 2 enemies in the foreground and you're attacking that one enemy in the foreground that's closest to you, and your attack looks like it can reach the second enemy in the foreground, it typically does. But it feels like, well, this attack feels like it's got, a bit of a sweep to it. Why is it not hitting the foreground and the middle ground? Like, why is it not hitting the next row over? It's hard to explain, but it's one of those things that it feels like the positioning mechanics are just slightly different now compared to the prototype. Not necessarily that that's a bad thing, it could be that this is easier to deal with from a gameplay mechanic standpoint, or it's possible that this is, a side effect of, things like the attack indicator needing to change how attacks kind of function. But it's very jarring to go from the prototype to the backer preview and feeling like, okay, these attacks, like, I feel like this attack should be hitting more people, and it's not. And part of that could just be having to learn, the characters' attack styles, their actual attack ranges. But seeing as how, the main character is in both the prototype and the backer preview, her attacks feel a little disjointed compared to each other, and that could just be, like I said, it could just be a development change, something that's kind of unintended consequence of, adding the mechanics, or it could just be something, oh yeah, we didn't really think about that. But it feels like some attacks should have greater range than they do, and, the range that they do have feels weird. But again, depending on how the tutorials are written for it, it could be what I'm thinking of. There's, you know, background, middle ground, and foreground. So you've got those kind of three areas to attack from, and, you know, anyone on the same specific plane of attack, you know, that's where the attack ranges actually come in, unless you're using specifically an up attack or down attack, which the way it was worded in the prototype made it feel a little bit like, oh yes, up attack is, you know, AoE sweeping. And it's like, okay, I'm doing an AoE sweeping in this one, in the backer preview, and it doesn't quite feel like a sweep, you know? But I guess that could just be chalked up to needing to reword that particular tutorial tip. I'm not 100% sure. We'll see how that one goes. And that's really the camera and the way that attacks feel are really my two biggest things of, like, okay, this doesn't feel as good as the prototype. Like, the prototype felt fantastic. This feels a little off. The camera really being my biggest issue. The attacks, like I said, once you learn the new combat mechanics, you'll probably just kind of, if someone who's played the prototype going in and playing the backer preview, or if this carries over into the full game, it'll take a little bit of adjustment, but it's learning the combat mechanics just as it was kind of difficult learning the combat mechanics for the prototype. So I'm not saying that that's a negative for anything. That's something that felt disjointed to me. As it is now, the only thing that I can also say about the music feels like it's, you know, more polished. I do kind of miss the soundtrack from the prototype. It felt kind of large, like music in a large area. I guess the best way I could say it is, you're hearing this type of music in the ruins of the prototype. You're in this, like, large, expansive, kind of surreal place. The music felt like it kind of hit that atmosphere. The music didn't quite feel like it hit that atmosphere for the backer preview, but you can tell more effort has been put into the backer preview music. They've obviously got more people who have experience with, you know, sound and music design going into it. It doesn't feel like it doesn't have that, like, music in a cathedral type feeling that the prototype had. And I hope that that's just, you know, the specific aesthetic choice for that scene versus the rest of it. Like, I know the whole game is not going to have, hopefully not going to have that feeling, but it was definitely something I noticed from the prototype to the backer previews. Like, the music felt like it fit the theme of the area really, really well. Now it's just really good music, not necessarily that it feels like it fits the area as well. But I'm also not a musician, so take my word for salt. Really, other than that, like I said, there is so much more polish on this than the amount of polish is incredible, because everything has been tweaked. There have been just so many, you know, minor to major improvements and upgrades that I'm really surprised by, because the prototype really did set the bar really high. They could have just made the entire game exactly like the prototype, and it still would have been worth backing the crowdfunding project. Now it's like, yeah, we took all that, we've learned a little bit, we're applying some new stuff, we've got some ideas that we kind of want to expand on, which is, you know, amazing. And that's kind of what you want projects to be like. But still, the bar was set really high, and the fact that they're just like, okay, we're going to raise the bar up just a little bit more, and maybe a little bit more, and maybe a little bit more. So, yeah, if you have a chance to play either version of this, if you are a backer, check all of the Indiegogo information. They send out information on how to download the backer preview for various formats. If you didn't back it, the prototype is still available. I know it's definitely available on PlayStation Network. I don't know if it's available anywhere else at the moment. So if you have a PS4 and you haven't backed it, you can try downloading it there. If you have backed it, go check all of your backer survey kit information to figure out how to download the backer preview to give it a try, because it's an amazing looking game, and there's just so much to it that's like so much of like my classic generation RPGs, Super Mario RPG, Valkyrie Profile, Shadow Hearts, things like that. That there's a lot that you can see that's being paid homage to, while not directly copying them. You can see that the homage, but still retaining that it's something new and unique. So I'm really excited for it. I cannot wait for this game to come out. I'm not waiting patiently. I'm waiting rather impatiently for 2018. So a lot of these awesome crowdfunding games will be released. I'm super excited for it. So yeah, go check it out, and I hope you've enjoyed kind of my look at the prototype, my look at the backer preview, the kind of comparison analysis. Like I said, I'm not a game designer, I'm not a game developer. Just, you know, some schmuck giving what I'm noticing as I play through it. Just, you know, my thoughts, my feelings. So let me know what you think of the game. Is it one that you look interested in? Is it something, you know, looks unique? I'm curious. So, and I will see you in future videos. So till then, later everyone.
Roti.